Rebecca Walsh had built her entire life on certainty. 43 years of calculated decisions, a respectable marriage that looked perfect in Christmas cards, two college-bound children, and a career as a corporate attorney that paid for the Tudor house in the suburbs. She'd perfected the art of not asking herself difficult questions. But when her longtime physician retired, and she found herself sitting in an examination room across from Dr. Sophia Martinez, something she'd buried for decades began clawing its way to the surface. It started with a routine checkup. It ended with Rebecca finally understanding what it meant to be alive. Rebecca's fingers drummed against her thigh as she sat in the sterile examination room, the paper gown crinkling with every small movement. She hated change. Dr. Morrison had been her physician for 15 years, and his retirement had felt like a personal betrayal. Now she was stuck with whoever the practice had assigned her. The knock on the door was confident, not tentative. "Mrs. Walsh, I'm Dr. Martinez." Rebecca looked up and felt something shift in her chest, a sensation so unfamiliar it took her a moment to identify it, as her heart actually racing. Dr. Sophia Martinez was perhaps in her late 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a professional bun, warm brown eyes behind stylish glasses, and an air of competence that filled the small room. "Please, call me Rebecca," she heard herself say, which was odd because she never invited that familiarity with medical professionals. Sophia smiled, and Rebecca noticed the small dimple on her left cheek. "Rebecca, it is. I've reviewed your file. Everything looks good, but it's been almost 2 years since your last physical. Let's make sure we're staying on top of things." The examination began routinely enough. Blood pressure, slightly elevated, which Sophia noted with a small frown. Heart rate, Sophia's stethoscope was cool against Rebecca's back as she instructed her to breathe deeply. But when Sophia's fingers gently palpated the lymph nodes in Rebecca's neck, something happened. It wasn't sexual. That's what Rebecca would tell herself later, lying awake at 3 a.m. while her husband snored beside her. It wasn't sexual, but it was intimate in a way that made her aware of how long it had been since anyone had touched her with such focused attention. Sophia's fingers were gentle but thorough, professional but somehow personal. "Any pain here?" Sophia asked, her voice close. "No," Rebecca whispered, and hated how breathless she sounded. Sophia stepped back, making notes on her tablet. "Everything seems fine. Your cholesterol levels from last time were borderline. How's your stress level?" Rebecca laughed, a sound that came out more bitter than she intended. "I'm a senior partner at a law firm with 2 teenagers. Stress is my baseline." Sophia looked up from the tablet, really looked at her, and Rebecca felt seen in a way that made her want to both run from the room and never leave. "That's not sustainable, Rebecca. What do you do for yourself?" The question hit harder than it should have. What did she do for herself? Her mind went blank. Work, kids, maintaining the house, attending David's work functions, making sure everything looked perfect from the outside. I go to yoga sometimes," she lied. Sophia's slight smile suggested she knew it was a lie. "Sometimes isn't enough. Your body is trying to tell you something. The elevated blood pressure, the tension I can feel in your shoulders, you're running on empty." Rebecca felt her throat tighten. This stranger had identified something in 10 minutes that no one in her life had noticed in years. Or maybe they'd noticed and just didn't care enough to say anything. "I'll try to do better," Rebecca said, the automatic response she gave to everyone about everything. "Don't try. Do." Sophia's voice was firm but kind. "I'm going to recommend some blood work, and I want to see you back in 3 months. Not 6. 3. We're going to figure out what you need." As Rebecca dressed after Sophia left the room, her hands were shaking. She caught her reflection in the small mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back, flushed, disheveled, awake in a way she hadn't been in years. She told herself it was just a medical appointment. She told herself the flutter in her stomach meant nothing. She told herself a lot of things during the drive home. All of them were lies. Rebecca couldn't stop thinking about the appointment. 3 days later, she was still replaying every moment, the timbre of Sophia's voice, the way her eyes had crinkled when she smiled, the unexpected gentleness in her touch. It was ridiculous. She was a grown woman with a family and responsibilities, not some teenager with a crush. Except it felt exactly like a crush, which terrified her. She threw herself into work with renewed intensity, taking on a merger case that required 14-hour days. David barely noticed her absence. Their marriage had long ago settled into a comfortable roommate situation. They managed the household, co-parented efficiently, and had sex approximately once a month with the enthusiasm of people checking items off a to-do list. "You're distracted," her colleague Jennifer said over lunch at their usual spot. "What's going on?" Rebecca stabbed at her salad. "Nothing, just tired." "Bullshit. I've known you for 8 years. You're never just tired." Jennifer leaned forward. "Is it David? Are you two okay?" "We're fine. We're always fine." The words came out sharper than intended. Jennifer raised her eyebrows, but had the grace not to push. Instead, she changed the subject to office politics, and Rebecca pretended to care about who was angling for corner offices. That night, lying in bed beside her sleeping husband, Rebecca did something she hadn't done in years. She allowed herself to remember. College, sophomore year, Rachel. They'd been roommates, best friends, study partners. Late nights in the library that turned into later nights in their dorm room, talking about everything and nothing. The way Rachel would absently play with Rebecca's hair while they watched movies. The electricity when their hands touched. The night they'd almost... Rebecca had transferred schools the next semester, switched her major, met David at a church social her mother had insisted she attend, built a life that looked exactly like what everyone expected. She'd been so young, so scared, so desperate to be normal. Now she was 43, and a doctor she'd met once had cracked something open that Rebecca had spent 2 decades sealing shut. Her phone buzzed. A reminder, follow-up appointment with Dr. Martinez in 2 weeks for blood work results. Her heart did that stupid flutter again. "Pathetic," she whispered to the darkness. But she didn't cancel the appointment. The blood work had been routine. Rebecca had gone to the lab, rolled up her sleeve, and tried not to think about why her pulse quickened when the technician mentioned Dr. Martinez had ordered the tests. Now, sitting again in that examination room, she felt like a teenager waiting for a crush to notice her. The door opened. Sophia walked in, tablet in hand, wearing dark slacks and a burgundy blouse that made her skin glow. "Rebecca, good to see you." That smile again. "Blood work looks good overall. Vitamin D is a bit low, but that's common. I'm prescribing supplements." "Okay," Rebecca said, wondering why her vocabulary had suddenly shrunk to monosyllables. Sophia sat down, a move that made the appointment feel less clinical. "How have you been? Really?" "Fine. Busy with work." "And the stress management we talked about?" Rebecca felt her cheeks flush. "I've been meaning to..." "You haven't done anything." Sophia's tone wasn't judgmental, just matter of fact. "Rebecca, I see a lot of women like you. High achievers, taking care of everyone else, running themselves into the ground. 5 years from now, that turns into serious health issues. 10 years, and we're talking about heart disease, autoimmune conditions, burnout that lands you in the hospital. I just have a lot of responsibility then, and you'll be no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion." Sophia leaned forward. "Can I ask you something personal?" Rebecca's breath caught. "Yes." "When's the last time you did something just because it made you happy? Not for your family, not for work, just for you." The question hung in the air. Rebecca's mind raced through her daily life, her weekly routine, her yearly calendar. Everything was for someone else. Everything had been for someone else for so long she couldn't remember what happiness for its own sake even felt like. I don't know, she finally admitted, and felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm. Don't apologize. Sophia's voice was soft. You're allowed to feel things, Rebecca. That simple permission broke something. Rebecca felt a tear slip down her cheek, then another. She covered her face with her hands, mortified. She heard Sophia move, then felt a tissue pressed into her hand. When she looked up, Sophia had pulled her chair closer, her expression full of a compassion that made Rebecca want to cry harder. I have a colleague, Sophia said quietly. Dr. Sarah Kim. She's a therapist who specializes in working with women navigating life transitions. I think you might benefit from. Dr. Sarah Kim's office was nothing like Margaret expected. Instead of the sterile clinical feeling she associated with medical spaces, it was warm and inviting, soft lighting, comfortable chairs, plants in the corners, and abstract art on the walls that somehow felt calming rather than pretentious. Margaret, come on in. Dr. Kim was perhaps in her 50s, with short silver hair and kind eyes that reminded Margaret slightly of her grandmother. They settled into chairs across from each other. No desk barrier, no clipboard, just two people in a quiet room. Dr. Vasquez referred you? Can you tell me what brings you here? Margaret had prepared a speech about stress management and work-life balance. What came out instead was, I think I might be gay, and I'm terrified. The words hung in the air. Margaret felt her heart hammering. She'd never said it out loud, not once in 43 years. Dr. Kim's expression didn't change. Thank you for trusting me with that. Can you tell me more? And suddenly, Margaret couldn't stop talking. She told Dr. Kim about Rachel, about the feelings she'd buried, about building a life that looked right from the outside while feeling hollow on the inside. She talked about David, about their passionless marriage, about how she'd convinced herself that this was just what adult relationships became. And then I met Dr. Vasquez, Margaret said, her voice barely above a whisper. And I felt something I haven't felt in 20 years. Just from a medical examination. How pathetic is that? It's not pathetic, it's human. Dr. Kim leaned forward. Margaret, can I ask, have you ever allowed yourself to consider what you actually want? Not what your family wants, not what society expects, but what you want. I have children, a husband, a life. I can't just. I'm not suggesting you blow up your life. I'm asking if you've ever given yourself permission to even think about what would make you happy. Margaret shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I'm too old for this. I made my choices. I can't. You're 43. You could live another 40 years. Do you want to spend them pretending? The question was like a punch to the gut. They sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Dr. Kim spoke again. This is a process. You don't have to make any decisions today. But I think it's time you started being honest with yourself about who you are. Margaret left that session feeling cracked open and raw. She sat in her car for 20 minutes before driving home, trying to pull herself together. That night, David was already asleep when she came to bed. She looked at him, this man she'd spent 20 years with, this stranger she'd built a life around. He wasn't a bad person. He was just the wrong person. She'd always known it. She'd just never admitted it. The next morning, Margaret called Elena's office and made an appointment for a physical she didn't need. The receptionist didn't question it. 3 days later, she sat in that examination room again, her heart racing. Elena walked in, surprise crossing her face. Margaret? Is everything okay? Your next appointment isn't for another 2 months. I know, Margaret's courage faltered. I wanted to thank you for the referral. Dr. Kim is really helping. Elena smiled. I'm glad. You deserve support. Can I ask you something? The words came out before Margaret could stop them. Of course. How did you know? That I needed more than just medical help? Elena was quiet for a moment. Because I recognize something in you. The way you hold yourself, like you're bracing against the world. The sadness in your eyes, even when you smile. I've seen it before. She paused. I've felt it before. The air in the room shifted. Margaret's pulse thundered in her ears. I came out at 30, Elena said softly. Left the engagement, lost half my family, had to rebuild everything. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, and the best. Margaret felt something break open in her chest. I don't know if I'm brave enough. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Margaret. It's doing the thing even though you're terrified. Their eyes met, and Margaret saw understanding there. Not pity, not judgment, just recognition. Someone who knew exactly what she was going through because they'd been there. I should go, Margaret whispered. Okay, Elena didn't move to stop her. But Margaret, whatever you decide, make sure it's your choice. Not fear's choice. Yours. Margaret drove home in a daze. That night, she told David they needed to talk. The divorce wasn't easy. Nothing about dismantling 20 years of shared life could be. David had been hurt, confused, then angry. The kids struggled, especially their daughter Emily, who stopped speaking to Rebecca for 3 months. You're ruining our family, Emily had shouted through tears. How could you be so selfish? Those words haunted Rebecca during the hardest moments. The late nights alone in her new apartment, the whispers she imagined at school functions, the way her mother had hung up the phone when Rebecca tried to explain. Dr. Kim's office became her sanctuary. Week after week, they worked through the guilt, the grief, the terrifying freedom of starting over. You're not ruining your family, Dr. Kim said gently during one particularly difficult session. You're being honest. That's not the same thing. Tell that to my daughter. She's 17. Her brain literally isn't developed enough yet to fully process complex emotional situations. Give her time. Keep showing up, keep being honest, and trust that she'll find her way to understanding. Rebecca held on to that hope like a lifeline. 6 months after moving out, she went to Sophia's office for a routine checkup. They hadn't seen each other since that pivotal appointment, though Rebecca had thought about her constantly. Sophia walked in, and her face lit up in a way that made Rebecca's heart skip. Rebecca, you look different. I left my husband. The words came out simple, factual. I came out, my life is kind of a mess, but I'm sleeping better than I have in years. Sophia's smile was radiant. How do you feel? Terrified, relieved, free, all of it at once. That sounds about right. Sophia checked her vitals, the routine familiar now, but charged with something new. Blood pressure's down, that's good. Turns out living authentically is good for your health. Rebecca tried to keep her tone light. Who knew? Sophia laughed, and the sound made Rebecca feel brave. So, I have a question, and you can absolutely say no, and I'll never bring it up again, and we'll pretend this never happened. Okay, Sophia said carefully. Would you maybe want to get coffee sometime? Not as doctor and patient, just as 2 people? Sophia set down her tablet. I'd love to, but I need to transfer you to another physician first. I can't date a patient. Rebecca felt hope bloom in her chest. You want to date me? Rebecca, I've wanted to ask you out since the 3rd appointment, but you were married and you were my patient and I was trying to be professional. Sophia's cheeks flushed. Now you're not married, but you're still my patient, so I still have to be professional. For now. How long does it take to transfer to another doctor? I can have your files moved by end of week. Rebecca smiled, really smiled, for what felt like the first time in years. Then I'll call you next Monday. I'll be waiting. The first date was coffee that turned into dinner, that turned into walking around the city until midnight, talking about everything and nothing. Sophia told her about coming out, about rebuilding relationships with her family, about the loneliness of those early years and the joy of finally living as herself. Rebecca talked about Rachel, about all the years she'd spent hiding, about her fears for her children, and her hope that they'd eventually understand. Emily still won't talk to me, Rebecca admitted as they sat on a bench overlooking the river. It's been 8 months. Sophia took her hand. She will. Kids are resilient, and she'll see eventually that you're happier. That counts for something. I hope so. Their second date was a hike. Their third was cooking dinner together at Sophia's apartment. On their fourth date, Sophia kissed her for the first time, and Rebecca finally understood what all those romance novels had been talking about. It wasn't perfect. Rebecca still struggled with guilt. Her son was adjusting better than her daughter, but family dinners were awkward. Some of her old friends had distanced themselves. Her mother still wouldn't acknowledge Sophia's existence. But she was happy. Real, bone-deep happy in a way she'd never experienced before. A year after that first appointment, Rebecca got a text from Emily. Can we talk? They met at a coffee shop. Emily looked nervous, picking at her napkin. I've been thinking, Emily started, about what you said, about living authentically. Rebecca waited, barely breathing. I'm still mad, and it's still weird, but... Emily looked up, tears in her eyes. I want you to be happy, Mom. And I can see that you are, with her, with Sophia. Rebecca felt tears streaming down her own face. Really? Really, and I'd like to meet her, officially, not just passing in the hallway when I'm picking up stuff from the old house. She'd love that. Rebecca reached across the table. Thank you, sweetheart. Thank you for trying. Emily took her hand. I love you, Mom, even when you're comply. Rebecca's journey didn't end with a perfect happily ever after. Real life rarely does. But it ended with truth, authenticity, and the courage to choose herself. 2 years later, she's building a life that feels genuinely hers, surrounded by people who love all of her, not just the parts she was willing to show. What about you? Have you ever had a moment that changed everything? Drop a comment below. I read every single one, and your story might inspire someone else who's struggling. And if this resonated with you, hit that like button and follow for more real, raw stories about love, identity, and finding yourself at any age.